at the edge of an ancient beech forest, where trees cast deep shadows even at noon and the air stayed cool even in high summer, stood a solitary house. Made of stone, with narrow windows, a tiled roof, and shutters that clattered in the western wind. The house looked like it had grown out of the land itself. Moss clung to the base of the walls, and climbing vines draped the southern side in green. This was the forest ranger's house. Joseph Braun had lived there for nearly all his conscious life. Tall, broad-shouldered, with gray streaks at his temples and the weary eyes of someone who had seen many winters, he was the last real forest warden in the region. He knew the woods as well as the lines on his hands, where the wild blueberries grew, where owls nested, and where bear trails crossed with those of wolves. People respected him not for his words. He spoke little, but for his work, his honesty, and his quiet presence. He lived with a dog. The dog's name was Tarek. No one in the village of Muldorf knew exactly where he'd come from. No one remembered Joseph having a puppy. One day, the dog simply appeared, dusty, skinny, with ribs showing and wariness in his eyes. Joseph opened the gate, walked into the house without looking back. Tarek followed and never left. Tarek grew into a strong, broad-chested dog with thick, ash-gray fur, short ears, and a slow, thoughtful gaze. He didn't bark without reason, didn't beg for affection, never pushed his presence. He was like a branch resting in a stream, not disruptive, yet subtly steering the flow. He and Joseph understood each other without words. They walked the forest trails together, watched for poachers, monitored wildlife, and always returned together. Tarek read scents in the air, while Joseph read the moss and mushrooms underfoot. Together, they became a natural part of the landscape. Joseph rarely visited the village anymore. Muldorf knew him, the quiet man with the dog who lived at the edge of the forest. They respected him in silence. The shop always kept fresh bread for him, without asking if he'd come. Children brought dried biscuits for Tarek. Adults left tins of tea or tobacco on the shop bench. On warm Sundays, Joseph sometimes sat on the bench beneath the old elm, sipping tea from a metal mug, watching clouds drift above the treetops. Tarek lay beside him, his ears twitching at every sound. Cracking branches, wings above, the rustle of life in the trees. That summer, Joseph felt a different kind of weariness. Not the kind that goes away after sleep, but the kind that settles in the bones and doesn't leave. His coughing grew worse. He walked less. Tarek noticed. He stayed closer, watched Joseph more intently. When the old man fell once near the woodshed, the dog crawled under him, offered his back, and stood still until Joseph could rise. A few days later, a medical van pulled up to the gate. Frau Elsa, a neighbor, had called the doctor after seeing no smoke from the chimney for days. Joseph took no bag, no book, no mug. He threw on his jacket and walked to the van. He didn't glance back. Tarek stood on the porch, unmoving, eyes locked on the empty path. Tarek did not leave his post for 3 days. He didn't eat. He didn't enter the house. On the 4th day, he stood, circled the yard once, sniffed the wind, and entered the forest. He walked not as a hunter, nor as a guardian, but as one who feels a pull. Somewhere in the thicket, he caught a scent. Fresh, unfamiliar. A boy. Sweat, torn cloth, bruised plants, and a faint perfume that lingered on familiar hands. It was Leon, a teenage boy who'd come to Muldorf with his mother for the summer. He'd often visited Joseph, asking about deer, birds, and tracks. He had a notebook, a pair of binoculars, and a thirst for solitude. Joseph had warned him about wandering too far. The warning had gone unheard. The trail led down into a boggy hollow. Tarek moved faster now. The scent faltered, scattered. The boy was lost. When Tarek found him, Leon was huddled beside a fallen tree. His backpack torn, face scratched, lips cracked from thirst. He didn't even react at first, just stared. Tarek said nothing. He lay down beside him and closed his eyes. That night, the air turned cold. Branches creaked. Moss dampened beneath them. The dog didn't move. He warmed the boy. At dawn, Leon tried to stand. He limped, leaning on a branch. Tarek walked beside him, matching his pace, stopping when needed. They walked for hours through marsh, up a rocky slope, past an old deer blind. By evening, they reached a logging path where the air smelled faintly of smoke. A passing worker spotted them. Leon was taken home. His mother cried. The boy mumbled something about a dog. They called for Tarek, searched, called again. But he was already gone. Joseph returned a week later. The neighbors helped him to the gate. He walked slowly, leaning on a cane. The yard was quiet, but on the porch sat Tarek. He stood, walked toward Joseph. The old man reached out, touched his fur. They stayed there for a long time. No words, only the scent of moss, old timber, and something like memory. Leon visited often after that. He sat on the porch, brought dry bread, stared into the trees. Sometimes Joseph nodded. Sometimes they drank tea in silence. Tarek lay at their feet, breathing softly. The path they had followed, Tarek and the boy, was not on any map. No ranger knew it, but it existed now. In pollen, in bent branches, in vanished footprints. It lived in the dog's heart. And if ever someone was lost again, the forest would remember. Because once, a dog had heard the silence and gone where he was needed.